Welcome to this presentation that we're all lucky enough to be here for. I'm Jane Patterson. I'm the project director of the Communities of Calling initiative of Collegeville Institute. And for 5 years now, the Communities of Calling has been working with 13 congregations from a multitude of denominations on how to help people discern and live into their callings. So this presentation is part of sort of the arc of our final work when we're considering together how both our individual and our communal callings are fully embodied in the world. So Jesse, would you please introduce our speaker?
Yes, Ellie Roscher. She is sunshine embodied. That's what I think of Ellie, truly a bright light in our orbit. And we're just so grateful to work with Ellie. Ellie has been a member of the Collegeville Institute board for many years. She's a loving mama. When I think of your callings, mom, spouse, writer, there's so many. Ellie is just a very engaged member of our community. And she's the author of this, just out about a month and a half now, Ellie, this new book, The Embodied Path. She's also written 12 Tiny Things, Play Like a Girl, and How Coffee Saved My Life. She teaches yoga at Up Yoga, writing at the Loft Literary Center, and Embodied Racism at the Minnesota Writing Project. Ellie holds an MFA in writing from Sarah Lawrence College and an MA in theology from Luther Seminary. We're so grateful, Ellie, that you're leading us through this embodied callings.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here, and it's so fun to see a couple familiar faces on Zoom. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the gift of your time. I really appreciate it. I love doing work in our bodies and inviting folks into deeper embodiment as spiritual practice. And I think that that can be really helpful to come alongside work with anti-racism. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I tend to start meetings with a one-word check-in, just to kind of get a sense of where the energy in this shared community is at this particular moment. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or take a soft gaze and drop into your body and just notice how your body is feeling in this moment. No need for toxic positivity. We want to actually know how it is that you're doing. And we're never just one thing, but notice what's kind of bubbling up to the surface, what's maybe taking up a little bit more space. What kind of energy are you bringing with you into our community today? Okay. And then I think our group is intimate enough that I'd love if you'd be willing to come off mute and share your word versus put it in the chat. So I'll begin and just call on folks as I see you on my screen. I'm feeling grounded at this particular moment. Jesse, how about you?
Chaotic.
Say it again. Sorry, I missed it.
A bit chaotic.
Thank you. Jane.
Heat up.
Liz.
Cramped.
Thank you. Stephen.
Exhausted.
Duffy.
Great expectations.
Thank you. Marsha.
Mixed. Mixed up. How's that?
I'll take it. Thank you. I appreciate you. Cindy, how are you feeling?
Curious.
Wonderful. Thanks. Catherine.
To do. I know that's not a verb, but I feel to do.
Yes, I get you. This is not a game where we get kicked off islands for there's no rules to break. That's a wonderful check-in. Thank you. I appreciate that. Amy, how are you feeling?
Excitedly anxious.
Good one. Thank you. Carol, are you with us? How are you feeling?
I am. Sorry, I'm having camera issues, but I'm here.
Nope. No worries.
Actually, the word that came to mind for me was restful. And I think that's because I am I am home on this snowy day, Zooming from home, which is a real gift.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for that. Kelly, how are you feeling today? We'll see if
I
she.
think she's driving. It looked to me like she was driving, so that maybe gets in the way.
Yeah, no worries at all. Okay, that's super, super helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we know that anti-racism work happens at several different levels simultaneously. It's something that we opt into on a moment-to-moment basis, and it can do work on the body level, on the interpersonal level between people, in the institutional level, and then in the systemic level. And often in communities that I'm a part of, I notice folks, myself included, jumping to those last three, the interpersonal work, the systemic work, the institutional work. And a lot of times we can burn out of the work and not figure out how to set a sustainable pace, not figure out how to take it on as the work of our lives, in part because we haven't equipped our bodies to do that work, to be able to sustain. We're learning so much about the body and about how trauma lives and breathes in our bodies. And it's a really exciting time, in my opinion. So we know that healing actually happens in our bodies. So I get really excited about doing anti-racism work at the body level. And these folks that I get to introduce you to over the coming months, Kevin Lally and Yishan, have also invited me along with them in their work to wear that hat in the anti-racism work, to make sure that we're continuing to do the work at a body level so that we can show up in interpersonal, in institutional, in systemic communities, really being able to push levers and be able to show up as healing bodies, as bodies that are moving toward wholeness. So I deeply, deeply believe that if we want transformation in our communities, part of that work is transforming ourselves at the body level. So that's kind of the hat that I wear, and that's why I'm doing the introduction session right here, is because we're going to bring our bodies together over the coming months into our institutions, thinking about systemic racism, thinking about our interpersonal interactions, and it's all going to happen from our bodies. So Resmaa Menakem in My Grandmother's Hands is just such a helpful book in this regard, right? His work is around somatic abolition. The book, My Grandmother's Hands, is not a book to read, it's a book to work through. It's not a book to finish and put on the shelf. It's constantly open for me. And he made it abundantly clear that this is the work of my life. There will be no arriving. There will be no graduation. There will be no certificate. And so one of the things he says that is so beautiful is that it's the work of our lives to inhabit our bodies. So in this community that's talking about vocation, can that be part of the conversation? That God is calling us to inhabit our bodies as part of the work of our lives. And Resmaa then says, in our bodies, as we're inhabiting our bodies, we're going to come across internalized racial trauma, regardless of if you have a white body or a body of culture. So my ancestors fled something to come here. And we're learning more and more about how that fleeing can get passed down through DNA from ancestors to my body. I have flight in my body. My ancestors gave up being Polish, and my ancestors gave up being Irish to become white. And there's grief involved in that. And so it's my work to come back in touch with where I come from and what that culture was that was given up. That's work to me at the body level. It's going to look different for me to do healing work in my body as a white-bodied person than it's going to look for a body of culture to be doing healing work in their bodies. And it's so important for all of us to turn toward that work at the body level and be open to it. So I am firm that whiteness is the problem of racism. And when I learned about racism in school, whiteness was not talked about. It was studying the history of people of color in our country. And so when I work with Kevin, who's a whiteness scholar, we center whiteness temporarily as the problem of racism so that it can be decentered. And I need to do work to realize how my white body is showing up in community and how my white body might be doing harm. It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. So I've inherited some of these things from my white ancestors that I didn't ask for. But I do believe it's my work to metabolize through and move toward healing and wholeness in my own body so I show up a little bit differently in community. So Resmaa talks about how white bodies who haven't been in this process of work don't feel safe to bodies of color, to bodies of culture. So a real quick side story that I tell to kind of make an equation is I used to teach theology in a high school classroom. And one of the things that I had to teach was like sex, sexuality, dating, intimacy. And the kids would kind of come in uncomfortable, little sweaty, little clammy. They weren't sure if this was going to be super fun to talk about sex in school with me, right? And so part of what I thought my work was as a teacher was to carve out some capacity in my body to take in all of their awkwardness, all of their confusion, all of the shame that has already started to build up, to take that into my body and have space to metabolize it, to transfer it and kick it back to them as love. Right. So there's always this moment when we start the unit where some kid is testing me out and kind of throws something at me. If I can take that in and kick it back as love, the whole room's like, oh, settle up. Okay. She can take what we've got for her. And so I think about this as part of the work of nonviolence, is being able to have capacity in our bodies to kick things back as love. And so that happens when we inhabit our bodies. So Resmaa talks about, when he's talking about the work of our lives to inhabit our bodies, he says that children know who the elders in a community are without needing like name tags. And the way that children know who the elders are is they're the folks who are inhabiting their bodies. They are the folks who have done the work to be living out of their bodies still. And so I take that really seriously as a teacher who's around young people, is I want to constantly be doing the work to continue to inhabit my body so that young people can sense that I have some capacity to be with them in really uncomfortable moments, in racialized moments, in moments where there's some harm that needs to be addressed. That spaciousness is generative. And I think it's really important for our work. So he's going to say, we don't become elders just by getting older, by time passing. We have to engage in the work. Okay, pause. Hi, Kim. Great to see you. How are you today? Good. Okay. Thanks for being here. Okay, so I'm going to be coming along Kevin and Yishan. Kevin is a whiteness scholar. He's a white man who got his PhD in whiteness. Like, let's study how white teachers educate white students about whiteness in a way that doesn't send them into guilt and shame. I think that's endlessly fascinating. And he went into the PhD program wanting a curriculum. Just tell me what the answer is. Tell me what to teach. And he learned over those 7 years of a PhD that what we already know, we can't think our way out of this problem. We can't think our way out of racism. This is a feeling. This is a body thing. This is like healing at the body level is part of what needs to happen. Well, he's have gone through a ton of body trauma. So he asked me to come along with him because he gets like that this is a feeling problem and he didn't trust himself to facilitate that part, right? Then Yishan is absolutely brilliant. You're gonna love her. Saddle up because she talks faster than anyone I've ever met in my life. And she does these fantastic inclusivity workshops. So she is a woman of color, and she has asked me to come alongside of her as well and do some of the embodiment work. And I just love it. Okay. So the 3 pathways that I use to deeper embodiment are breath, movement, and reflective writing. So we're going to do a little bit of those 3 things together today. Those 3 things are not the only pathways in. They might not work for you. So our work in inhabiting our bodies is figuring out what our pathways are back home to our bodies, where we can inhabit them. How do we get deeper into our bodies to explore what's living and breathing there? So for me, part of that work is, like I already said, uncovering my past, getting in touch with my ancestors, understanding more what might have been passed down to me as inheritance, realizing that I have a body, that my body has a race, and that I do have a culture. Whiteness has typically been defined by what it is not. And my work is to figure out who I am, where I'm from, what is my culture, what is my race. I do have a body, and how that body shows up in community deeply, deeply matters. Okay. Deep breath. So I would like to address a little bit of the layer that we are religious, because I haven't done that explicitly yet. And this God layer, it gets tricky real fast. And I think that it just needs to be named and held as we move forward with Kevin and Yishan in the coming months. Okay, so I love, and I think it's really important to say, regardless of where your faith background is, regardless of the setting where you're a leader, we also have to acknowledge that we live in a white Christian nation that is struggling with white Christian nationalism. So even if your faith community is doing really generative work, we have to acknowledge this layer of America at this moment that is really, really white and Christian, and that it's extremely toxic and problematic, right? Okay, so one of the things that I see alive and well that I think can be a tool to name in our communities and identify and then dissolve is mind-body dualism, where the mind is detached from the body and that there's value placed on those things. The mind is more pure and holy and powerful than the body. And I like to point out that I don't think that this is a God or a Jesus thing. I think this is a first century church thing that then got layers and layers and layers and layers, right? So when we look at our creation story, we see a God that tends to bodies, that it takes time and care to create the human body. And then God looks at God's creation and says, that is very good. God doesn't say, okay, well, the mind's pretty great, but the body's kind of, like your whole being is very good. And if we have any doubt from our creation stories, which we shouldn't, if we believe that God took on a body and became incarnate and took on flesh in Jesus Christ, we have to believe that God cares about bodies enough to want to know what that experience was like. And then when I read the Gospels, what I see is Jesus centering marginalized bodies again and again and again, taking bodies that have been isolated and sent away and inviting them back into the center of things, restoring them back into society, not as an idea, but in actuality, right? So he's using spit to help a man who can't see, like this, like he's restoring bodies back into community. To me, it's very clear that Jesus isn't afraid of bodies. God isn't afraid of bodies, but our church is petrified of bodies. So let's follow that thread. Where's the origin of that? And when the first century church was forming, because I don't even think it was a Hebrew problem. Like if you look at Song of Songs, that's erotic poetry. There's beautiful bodies everywhere in that. The Hebrew culture loved and respected bodies. This hatred of bodies in part was brought in by Plato and the Stoics. And I don't think it can be overstated how much influence Plato and the Stoics had on our modern day church. And if you want a book on that, I'll send it to Jesse and Jane to send on. It's called Embodiment by James B. Nelson. So good. So Plato believed that the body was dirty, that the love of the body was gross, and that the mind was pure and holy. And so there's this separation. The Stoics believed that a lack of emotion was the highest value. So then things like self-control became a spiritual value, where it was the mind's job to control the body, to suppress emotion. Okay, well now fast forward to when my Irish ancestors came to the United States. They were told, you drink too much, you have too much sex, you have too many babies, you fight too much, you yell too much, tone it down, get in control of your body. That exuberance was repressed for whiteness, to become a good corporate body that puts your head down and works hard. And what you exchange for that is the promise of financial security. So part of my work as a white body is to reclaim my exuberance, and that my body is beautiful and wise, and that I don't need to be stoic. I don't need to control the emotions of my body. In fact, I can turn toward my body and trust the wisdom of it as a way of knowing. Okay, so then we get the church fathers, who I get a little bit crass because I'm going through history very quickly. There were church fathers who were petrified of their bodies, their libidos, right? The job of the mind to control the body, like that's one way that shows up. So then we get the thou shall nots, and everything becomes about self-control. The highest place in these societies were elite men who got to hang out in their minds, politicians, right? Philosophers who got to sit around and think all day. Well, there's still residue of that in our society of what labor gets valued. So there's already a gender component that a woman's body bleeds and breastfeeds. Her work is in her body. That is inferior to the work of these elite men who are living in their minds. So then when you add the God layer to it, game over, right? And then when race gets introduced to this, well, we have to have an explanation for slavery, right? And Christianity plays into that. We could go into depths of the Crusades and how geography and race and power start to play into it. But what comes out is the fact that minds get associated with men and whiteness, and bodies get associated with women and people of color. And there's a hierarchy there. And so then the spiritual journey is to climb up out of your body and live in your mind closer to God. To build a dam in your neck and suppress what is happening in your body that is dirty. You go up to get closer to God. And so then we live from our foreheads, we live from our egos, we live from our minds. And we're now knowing that all of this repression isn't working. It's coming out as sickness. It's a ton of work to repress the body that is trying to communicate with you. And I think our system is really hell-bent on us staying disembodied, because if we get into our bodies, we're gonna set limits for ourselves. We're gonna take some Sabbath, right? Like our revolution will have some sustainability. We'll connect with each other and then watch out, right? So we have to kind of get at, where did this start so that we can disagree with it? I don't think in mind-body dualism terms, when the church fathers write about their bodies being dirty, it doesn't land for me. But when they talk about the sin of arrogance, that doesn't land for me either. Like, I want to talk about the sin of hiding, right? So I think we can go back free Plato, pre the Stoics, pre the church fathers, pre these men who are afraid of their bodies, who think it's their job to suppress and repress and control. Go back to the creation story, go back to Jesus's ministry that's centering the beauty and the wisdom and the power of our bodies. So Christianity is perpetuating mind-body dualism all of the time. Today, whiteness is about being stoic. It's about taming the emotions, toning it down. Think about how the consequences for showing rage and anger. And what happens when we repress that over a long period of time. So deprivation becomes a spiritual value. And I think this longing for exuberance is really, really beautiful. And if we can go back to that, like loving our bodies, trusting our bodies, having some communication between our minds and our bodies, not placing one as better or more holy than the other, I think there's a lot of healing that can happen there. So Resmaa talks about old pain, that there's pain in our bodies. Some of it is new. Some of it has layered within and patterned within our lifetime. Some of the pain in our bodies is old, and it's from our ancestors. And what he's doing, he's asking us to empty ourselves of this idea of mind-body dualism, be more open to the wisdom of our bodies. And what he's saying in this, which is really interesting, is there are real barriers for men, for white folks, for Christians, for Western thinkers. There's going to be real barriers to this work. Some of the barriers are really old and inherited. And so as we're doing the work, it's really helpful to remember this is going to be hard for people who have internalized this mind-body dualism and think the work of spirituality is to climb up out of our bodies into our minds. So we see in some of the Eastern spiritualities that transcendence happens by going deeper into our bodies to transcend, instead of this climbing up out to be in our minds, to get closer to God. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to lead us through my favorite breath exercise, which just acknowledges this mind-body dualism and opens up that pathway between our minds and our bodies so that we can get access. Once we hear our bodies talking to us again, we can build that trust back up and we can respond. And that's how we can show up in our bodies in community when we're doing this really, really difficult healing work. So one of the things Resmaa says is healing is hard, but so is not healing. Those are our two choices, and neither is easy. That the work of repression and ignoring our bodies is actually work as well. So it's going to get messy and hard to do this anti-racist work in the body. And I have done some of this breath work for straight white men who don't feel anything for 6 months. That makes sense to me. And it's really hard to keep going. And that's the work of our lives. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to lead us just with some breathing. If for any reason you feel more comfortable off screen, that's just fine, but we're not going to do anything weird. We're just going to be breathing. If you are ready, I'm going to invite you to kind of move your body. We've already been on Zoom for half an hour. So move your body kind of like a pet waking up from a nap, or like a toddler waking up from a nap. You know how they just move with intuition without overthinking it? So that might mean standing up. It might mean getting down on the carpet or the floor. It might mean a shoulder roll or two. Don't overthink it. Like, this is one of the ways we can just really gently build some trust back up with our bodies. Notice how your body is feeling. Notice where the tension has layered up in your body from sitting in front of a screen. Just invite movement and breath in. And notice how that sensation shifts when you move. All right. And then whenever you're ready for stillness, there's no need to rush. You can do this standing or seated. If you're standing, move your body weight around and feel the four corners of both of your feet and equally distribute your body weight among your 2 feet. If you're sitting, kind of rock your body weight around and notice your 2 sits bones underneath you. And as much as you can, equally distribute your weight among your 2 sitting bones. So uncross your legs, place your feet at hip distance, stack your shoulders over your hips. Place your hands somewhere that feels comfortable. And then I'll invite you to shut down your eyes or take a soft gaze at the floor in front of you. On your next inhale, reach the crown of your head up toward the ceiling. Lengthen out your spine just a bit. On your next exhale, gently ground down through your sitting bones, through the soles of your feet. Allow the floor and the chair to hold you up. Notice the temperature of the air in the room on your skin. Notice the sound of my voice and notice some sounds in your space. And then bring your awareness to the crown of your head. Slowly work that awareness down to the soles of your feet. No need to rush. Just notice how your body is feeling. Notice places where you sense some expansion, where you sense some constriction. And then bring your awareness to your breath. No need to alter your breath at all. Simply notice that you're breathing. Allow the sound and the rhythm of your breath to soothe you and invite you a little bit deeper into your body. And then slowly, gently bring your awareness down to your tailbone. We'll meet there at the end of an exhale. On your next inhale, sweep your awareness up from your tailbone to your midbrain. Take your time. On your exhale, bring your awareness from your midbrain down to your tailbone. Inhale, tailbone to midbrain. Exhale, midbrain to tailbone. Widen the paintbrush. Inhale, tailbone to midbrain. Exhale, midbrain to tailbone. One more. Inhale, tailbone to midbrain. Exhale, midbrain to tailbone. On your next inhale, fill your lungs all the way up. Exhale slowly. When you reach the bottom of your exhale, blink your eyes back open and come on back to the breath. Okay, so super simple. That for me is a spiritual practice. I would do it daily, for any amount of time, sometimes up to 15 minutes of loops. So now it's become so embodied that on the go, I can do a loop. If I notice that I've built the bird's nest between my mind and my body, I can just do one loop and open it back up again. But these are practices, right? So if that worked for you, if you're interested in that, you could do 3 loops a day as spiritual practice to open that communication between your mind and your body. Okay. Now we're going to sync breath and movement. I think this is one of Jesse's favorites. I'm going to invite you to stand up if you can. And we're going to sync 4 movements with our breath. Okay. So I'll show you the 4 movements first. Again, you can always take yourself off video if you feel more comfortable. The first one, you're going to bring your arms up over your head. The second one, we're going to cactus our arms or goalpost our arms. Okay. The third one, we bring our forearms together. And then the fourth one, you let it go. Now, letting your arms fall, you have the option to also fold at your hips and let your whole upper body go. If you get lightheaded or faint, don't do that, just your arms, okay? So we're gonna do inhale, exhale, exhale. And unlike the loop where we weren't forcing our breath, here we're gonna kind of move our breath to get a little bit unstuck. Okay, so place your feet hip distance apart, maybe even a little bit more, and then place some softness in your knees so they're not locked out. Okay, and we'll meet at the bottom of an exhale and begin. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, cactus. Inhale together. Exhale, let it go. Inhale, up. Exhale, cactus. Inhale together. Exhale, let it go. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Last one. Inhale. Biggest one. Arms up. Exhale. Together. Let it go. Beautiful. Okay. Then take any joint rolls, any movement you'd like on your way back to the screen. No need to rush. Take your time. Okay. So next I'm going to invite us to do some reflective writing. I am a writer. I love writing. Some people have journaling up on a pedestal, and I like to bring it back down off of the pedestal. It's easy. We don't need to write in sentences or paragraphs. It's not being turned in or graded. One of the things I love about reflective writing is we can trust our bodies and kind of what comes up out of our subconscious that can sometimes surprise us. We're getting clay out on the paper that then we can choose to either mold and do something with, or sometimes we put things on the paper to just let them go, kind of slough off the top layer. All of that has a lot of value, and I think that reflective writing can be taken really seriously as spiritual practice, and specifically as a spiritual practice that helps us trust the wisdom of our bodies, trust what's coming up out of us, and allowing our bodies to feel what they feel. Okay, so the first question I'd invite you to do some written reflection on is, what are the barriers to you experiencing your body as home? I'll put that in the chat. Don't overthink it. Allow whatever comes up to come up. What are the barriers to you experiencing your body as home? I'll give you a few minutes to do some reflective writing on that. Okay. I know that is not ample time. I always invite you to circle back if it's feeling like there's more to explore. I put in the chat a quote that I love. Home is not where you were born. Home is where all your attempts to escape cease. So I have thought about that in terms of my body. Can I do the work where I'm not trying to escape it, but I can turn toward it with curiosity, with reverence, and honor the way that I know in my body. Okay. So another question is just really powerful to kind of get ideas out on paper to look at and work with. What are some ways that you see society valuing minds over bodies? And you could replace society with your community, with your church, if you wanted to take it personal and be like, how do I value my mind over my body as a way of knowing? You don't have to use society as the playground, but kind of explore, where do you see mind-body dualism alive and well in our society today?
Do you want us to speak out or write something or put something in the
I'm
chat?
sorry. I was going to say right. Yeah, just right for now. Thanks. Okay. The first one is very vulnerable and personal, but I'm wondering if anyone would be willing to come off of mute and share something that came up for you in the second prompt. Where is it that you still see mind-body dualism taking hold?
Well, I think for me, when you ask the question, ways you can see community valuing mind, body, and dualism in our society today, I'm a chaplain and a campus pastor. It's very hard to see it in society. I'm also the DEI trainer for our university. I'm a consultant of DEI. And so I don't see much value in our society because of mental illness, because of brokenness. It's hard to see what society is trying to do. On the spiritual aspect for me, being a spiritual counselor, I do have a hope that as a Christian, as a disciple, as a woman of God, and as a woman of color, that I would reflect to others that their mind and their body is important. I deal in healing of trauma and racial healing. it can be exhausting to those who don't really understand what it is. But I think there's much work to be done. As I tell people, we have left, but we have not arrived. So we still have much work to do in our society. And it gets hard. Sometimes you just want to throw in the towel. But when you have a vocation and a calling on your life, you can't run away from it. Yeah. So for me, there's some hope, but it's hard to see that hope with all that's going on in our world.
That's right. And that word exhaustion is a refrain that I hear from women of color. That makes sense to me. That
I call it the bag lady syndrome. People will look at you and say, girl, why are you carrying all those bags? Instead of saying, let me help carry some of your bags. You keep piling them on my desk and these expectations of me performing, it's exhausting. So I love the fact about the barriers of experiencing in my body. Yeah. But I'm learning. My new phrase is, I'm learning to water my body. I'm learning to water my body. I'm learning to plant seeds so that I can have joy and peace and love to continue to do the work. And so that is my phrase for 2023. I'm learning to water my body, because I've been dried out for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a spiritual journey and get away 3 days to water my body.
Right.
I can't give out of a dry body. Yeah.
Right. I love that for you. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. And that's so beautifully articulated how these levels are constantly working, that you're going to show up differently in community if you're dry. Love that. Okay. So the book, The Embodied Path, one of the things that I'm working with in that book is the idea of society's master narratives, and then the power of telling counter stories, telling stories that counter these boring, limiting, harmful narratives that society is telling constantly, like the white noise, the buzz, right? How do our body stories counter that? Steffi just told one, right? Like by telling a story about our bodies, we're going to push on some levers. So some of the master narratives that I hear about bodies in our society that have to do with race, whiteness actually wants me to believe that I don't have a body, right? That I'm a mind, that I don't have a race, that I don't have a culture, that I don't have a history. Whiteness doesn't want me to explore my internal racialized trauma. It wants me to think I'm fragile and that I need protection from other bodies, and that's not true. It wants me to believe that I am separate from the problem. That is not true. And so whiteness was created to divide, and we'll get into that with Kevin and Yishan. Like the work of whiteness was originally to divide European laborers from African laborers so they didn't band together and revolt, right? So anytime I am being separated, I need to tell a different story. I need to tell a counter story. So I have to think about my class and my race as well. So if I'm disembodied, I think I'm easier to control. I'll be a good capitalist worker that doesn't have any limits, right? That doesn't have any needs. I'll be docile and I'll be part of the empire. I deeply believe our church is supposed to be anti-empire right now, doing anti-empire work. And I think that telling our body stories as counter stories to these limiting narratives is part of the work. So to me, the lie of whiteness is that if I isolate and I work hard, if I put my head down and I don't organize with other people, if I just stay at my part of the assembly line and I don't stand up for myself and just keep working, then what I trade, I get financial security for that. That is not a God-inspired dream, in my opinion. So the church has this ability to counter that boring story and tell us what is at stake when we do claim our interdependence, when we do the work of community, when we do get really up into anti-empire stuff in our bodies. Okay, so I'm going to argue that telling my body story is inherently a counter story in a society that is so disembodied, that doesn't care about my body. So whenever I talk about my body and what's happening to it and that it has limits and that I have to water it, right? That I'm going to go take a 3-day vacation so that I can show up differently in my body. Like those, to me, those are very important counter stories to tell. And they're at 2 levels. One is that when I tell the story, it gives me a sense of freedom and agency. Steffi, when you were saying that, I felt this power that you were claiming in your body by sharing that story. So part of the telling our body stories is that it changes us, right? So my example of that is very dramatic. When I was 13, I injured my elbow very badly. And it was a double dislocation, compound fracture, the whole deal. Okay, healing was going very slowly, and I was frustrated because I was a competitive gymnast and I wanted to get back in the gym. So I'm an 8th grader, and the orthopedic surgeon said, okay, we weren't going to tell you this because you are so young, but I think you might need to know. When you came into the emergency room, we almost had to amputate your arm. And the injury had cut blood flow off to my hand. I had no pulse in my hand and the tissues were dying. Okay. So in that moment, the trauma that happened to my elbow didn't change. What changed in that moment was the story that I told about the trauma that happened to my elbow. I walked into the orthopedic surgeon's office, bitter, frustrated, thinking about what my body couldn't do. And I walked out of that office grateful, in awe, thinking about what my body could do. I might have 1 arm, but instead I have 2. Watch what I'm going to do with 2 arms for the rest of my life. Okay, the story changed. Nothing changed in my body. But when I changed my story, my sense of freedom and agency grew. So we're thinking about how we're telling our body stories, claiming our body stories, authoring our body stories in a way that grows our own sense of freedom and agency so we can be powerful community members, right? That's one. It changes me. When I tell that story, then it can put some pressure on society to make sure they know that my body exists and that I want my body located in our policies and advocated for, right? Our society does not give everybody a sense of belonging and safety yet. That's the work. So the more we tell our body stories, not only will we shift and claim our powers, but we can also expand our society's narratives so that more bodies, dare I say all bodies, are included and advocated for and feel safe and belong, and then watch out, then the revolution, right? So I'm really, really into body stories as counter stories to put pressure on these limiting, harmful master narratives. I believe in narrative repair, like the way that we tell our stories can repair. And as people of the Bible, like there's the story, that's endless. There's so much potential for that, right? So I'm going to invite you to think about that and just claim this truth that we all know that our bodies have a story. We hold stories in our bodies. The more we can inhabit our bodies and share our experience of our bodies in the world, the more we can be included, right? And the more that we can make our communities more interesting. So thinking about whose bodies get marginalized in our communities, and can we do some story sharing to build some empathy, to keep that listening muscle from atrophying, and to shift the master narrative. So our churches have stories that are folklore that can be looked at. Like, what is the power of the stories that we tell on a community level, and whose bodies are centered in it and whose aren't, right? Can we do body story sharing regularly so that that becomes the norm, and we can see whose bodies feel vulnerable and whose bodies feel safe? Belonging happens at the body level, right? So as a white-bodied person in society growing up, I have been told that I matter. And then I look out into society and I see that that is true. There are other bodies that are that are told you matter. And then you look out into society and you're like, no, I don't. No, I don't. And that is a safety issue. So if a body doesn't feel safe and they're in fight or flight mode, they're not going to enter into the dreaming, the visioning, because they're busy staying alive. There's an ease that comes with belonging, and it's a body ease. If I feel safe, if I feel like I belong, and those are feelings that happen in my body, then I'm going to enter into the dreaming and the visioning. I'm going to enter into the transformation. So constantly being wondering who doesn't feel like they belong, who doesn't feel safe at the body level, who's in fight or flight mode trying to stay safe. We are losing because those people aren't dreaming with us. Okay. So that's like a real quick deep dive into this idea of body stories that then I flesh out in the Embodied Path. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. I'd love to do one more breath exercise and one more movement exercise and just a little bit more writing. Okay, so I'm going to invite us to open up our breath pathways again. My legs are crossed. I'm going to uncross my legs. Sit on my sitting bones, stack my shoulders over my hips. I'll invite you to do the same. Take any of that movement that you'd like, maybe a shoulder roll or two, maybe a neck roll. I'm going to lead us in a square breath. So I'm going to be calling a 4-count inhale, 4-count hold, 4-count exhale, 4-count hold. Okay. So move. Oh, I just got some shoulder cracks there. That was awesome. Take any of that intuitive movement that feels generative to you. Ooh, yeah. Then stack your shoulders over your hips. Maybe blink your eyes shut or take that soft gaze. Reach the crown of your head up toward the ceiling. Gently ground down through your sitting bones and through the soles of your feet. Notice how your body is feeling. Notice your breath. Allow the sound and the rhythm of your breath to soothe you and anchor you in this moment. And then we'll meet at the bottom of an exhale to begin the square breath. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Return to your normal breath. On your next inhale, fill your lungs up more than usual. Exhale really slowly. And when you reach the bottom of your exhale, blink your eyes back open. Beautiful. So that was only a few squares, right? If you have time to do more than a few, it can be really, really lovely to start to get into the power of your inhale versus your exhale and what work those two things do for your body. All right, let's stand up if you're able. I'm going to do one more breath and movement. So there's two movements with this, but we're going to play around with the speed of our breath. So the first movement is we're going to reverse swan dive our arms up over our heads. And then the second movement is to bring our hands to heart center. When we give a slow exhale, we're going to move our hands slowly. When we do a quick exhale, we're going to move our hands quickly and kind of play with the difference of that. So feet are hip distance apart, maybe a little bit more. Put that softness in your knees, and then we'll give it a shot. On your inhale, reverse swan dive your arms up over your head. Exhale, slowly bring your hands to your heart. Take your time. Yeah. Slow inhale, arms up. Slow exhale, hands to your heart. One more like that. Slow inhale, reverse swan dive. Slow exhale, hands to your heart. Now in this one, we're going to do a slow inhale and a quick exhale. Reverse swan dive, inhale. Quick hands and breath. Try again. Slow inhale. Quick exhale. Yeah, one more time. Slow inhale. Quick exhale. Last one, slow, slow. Slow inhale, and then how slow can you go on your exhale? Take your time, fill it with your breath. Beautiful. Okay, and then take any other movement you'd like on the way back. Okay, so I did this one. I know I did this one with Jessie before. I'm going to invite a writing prompt. The sentence begins with I am from, and you're going to write 5 endings to that sentence. And you're going to complete that sentence any way you'd like, with a place, with a person, with a plant, with a food, with a celebration, with a character trait, with a sound bite. So, I am from the side pew at Holy Spirit Catholic Church. I am from Put Your Lips On. I am from Do Your Best. I am from Margie and Mike. I am from Diet Coke and Tootsie Rolls, right? Be playful with it. Finish 5 sentences. I am from, with a place, a person, a plant, a food, a celebration. You can't do it wrong. Okay, this is a delightful one to share as a way to get to know folks in a different way. And I think it's a counter story for me to claim that I have a culture, that I come from somewhere. That's undoing some of the work of whiteness. And so I would love to invite you to put one of your I am from phrases into the chat so we get a sense of, a tiny sense of who you are and where you're from. I'm from Saturday morning pancakes. I love that. I'm from mixtapes and Tiffany's. I think we're alone now. Yes. I'm gonna have that in my head for the rest of the day, and I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry about it. I am from the restlessness of restlessness of palm trees. Lovely, beautiful. I'm from the 11th row of section 231 in the Breslin Arena. Liz, that's great. The richness of the farm. Thanks, Marcia. I'm from stolen land that I'm reclaiming as home, sweet home. Thank you, Cindy. Beautiful. Yes, this is very powerful to do. You can do more than 5. You can find I am from poems on the internet that are gorgeous and ways to really process that in groups. Optional writing prompt to take with you with the rest of your day is to write about a time you realized that you are white, or to write about a time when you realized that you were a person of color. It doesn't have to be the first memory, but to start to get access, well, not to start but to get access to those stories that live in our bodies, that for some people have that racialized trauma tied to it, right? Steffi, thank you. Okay. So I will be coming alongside Kevin and Yishan in the coming months, and I will bring some more of these breath exercises, movement, writing prompts as a way to stay in our bodies as we're working through the content. I really appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate the quality of presence you brought with you into the community. I would love to end how we began with a one-word check out as we move into the rest of our day. So if you would be so kind as to close your eyes or take a soft gaze and drop back into your body. Notice how your body is feeling. We are never just one thing. But notice what is taking up a little bit more space or rising to the surface for you. What kind of energy will you bring with you from this community into the next piece of your day? I am feeling enriched by the wealth of this community. Thank you. Jessie, how about you?
Feeling a bit more settled.
Jane?
Spacious.
Liz?
Stretching.
Thank you. Steffi?
Water today.
Marcia?
Calmer.
I will take it, Marcia. I'll take it. Cindy, how are you feeling?
Flowing.
Beautiful word. Catherine?
I'm feeling fed.
Kim?
Inspired.
Carol?
I'm going to say anticipation.
Good word. Amy, are you with us? How are you feeling? Maybe not. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I hope that you can come back next month and join Kevin and myself. It's gonna be wonderful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. So great to see you. Be well.
Ellie,
Thank you so much, Ellie.
Thanks so much.